Christmas 1987, Dover, Arkansas. Gene Simmons is fed up with his life and his family. A controlling man, he decided that the holiday season was the easiest and most efficient way to rid himself of all of them. But what started on December 22nd didn't end until 6 days later, and in his wake were 16 dead bodies. This killing spree is still the worst mass murder in Arkansas and the worst crime involving one family in the history of the country. This is Ronald Gene Simmons, Christmas Carnage. Hey y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Podorf. Welcome to Hitched to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yes, welcome. And for our friends over there in the Bronx.
Okay.
Yo.
How you doing?
How you doing?
I don't know, is that the Bronx? Is that Brooklyn?
I think they're one and the same.
They're
actually.
not, and
Okay.
you're offending lots of people right now.
Yo, Adrian, wherever that's from.
Well, wherever you're listening, be sure to subscribe to Hitched to Homicide. Then like, rate, and review the podcast so people who love true crime just like you can find us. And if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button below.
Yep.
If you want true crime with us all the time, please join our closed Facebook group, The In-Laws and Outlaws. Go to Facebook and type in H2H In-Laws and Outlaws. Answer a couple questions you're in. I post lots of photos and other information in there. It's a really good group of people.
Yes, it
It's
is.
heating up for Christmas.
Yes, it is.
Just telling you
A
now.
lot of good memes are going on.
You can find us on Instagram at Hitched2Homicide or on X at H2H_podcast. And we also now have a Buy Me a Coffee link if you want to send Rob some coffee.
Please do.
He's drinking it right now. It's kind of cold outside. It's supposed to be. It's December.
Nice and toasty.
Yeah. You can find that link in our show notes as well. That didn't sound like I said show notes. It sounded like I said a bad word, but I didn't. I said
Shnotes.
show notes.
Close enough.
You can also send us a text. The link to that is at the top of the show notes. It says, send to Chris and Rob a text. I've got one today.
Oh.
It's from Joliet, Illinois. Isn't that where the Blues Brothers were from?
It is.
We love you, Joliet.
The land of Lincoln!
Yeah.
Quote, I just love this podcast. I wish you could do more episodes a week. I'm so impatient and always want more Hitched to Homicide.
Oh.
Very sweet. I'm not capable of doing more than one.
Yes, we're on a mission from God.
We're on a mission from God.
We are on a mission from God, for sure. We're getting the band back together.
Yeah, we are.
We're putting the band back together.
Well, we're getting into the holiday season and the holiday homicides.
Hmm.
This one's gruesome.
Really?
Yeah.
Like some of the others weren't.
You know, we've had somebody come into the In-Laws and Outlaws and say, I was listening and Chris was like, and this is where it gets weird. Maybe my tolerance is too high. Maybe that's what it is.
Exactly.
We just have a lot of dead bodies in this one.
Yep.
Before we get started, let me thank some sources. The Encyclopedia of Arkansas, Murderpedia, Find a Grave, the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, the Miami Herald, the Philadelphia Daily News, and About You magazine in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Oh, okay. Well, you ready?
I am.
Let's do it.
Ronald Gene Simmons. Gene Simmons, that's what he goes by.
Does Peter Chris know about
I
this?
was going to say, let the kiss comments start now.
When you first started, I was like, Gene Simmons did this? Oh
Well,
my
his name is Ronald Gene Simmons.
I know he's hard to get along with, but good Lord.
Apparently, yeah. He was born on July 15th, 1940 in Chicago, Illinois, to Loretta and William Simmons. Obviously, no part of the group KISS. Don't send us an email,
Yeah,
please. He goes by Gene. Gene was the second of 3 children. He's a middle child. On July 31st, 1943, William Simmons, his dad, dies of a stroke. And within a year, his mom remarried, this time to a man named William G. Griffin, who was a civil engineer for the United States Army Corps of Engineers. And the Corps moved Griffin, and subsequently him and his mom, to Little Rock, Arkansas in 1946.
Okay.
It was the first of several transfers that were going to take the family all across Arkansas for the next decade.
On the road again.
Yeah, Arkansas is beautiful.
Yeah.
On September 15th, don't much care for the basketball team right now, but that's where I'll leave that one.
Yeah.
If you know, you know.
That's for another day.
On September 15th, 1957, Gene dropped out of school and joined the U.S. Navy. So I'm thinking maybe he caught that bug from his stepdad. Maybe. I don't know. You know, they were moving. I mean, I realize he was Army Corps of Engineers, but
Right.
still, maybe he caught that bug, that military bug. His first station was Bremerton Naval Base in Washington State, where he met Bersabe Rebecca, she goes by Becky, Ulibarri. Becky was born in 1941 in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Her mom is May Barnum Novak, and she has a sister, Matilda.
Okay.
She's also got another sister, we're going to talk about her in a little bit, who's very supportive of her.
All right.
Becky and Gene marry in New Mexico on July 9th, 1960. In 1963, Gene leaves the Navy, and approximately 2 years later, he joined the Air Force.
Wow.
And during his 22-year military career, Gene was awarded a Bronze Star, the Republic of Vietnam Cross for his service as an airman, and the Air Force Ribbon for excellent marksmanship.
Wow.
That's called foreshadowing.
No. All right, here we go. Let me see if I can do it with this hand because Scotty's in this hand.
You're a man of many talents.
Scotty had no idea what I was doing.
There's like 3 notes in there. Dun, dun, dun.
Try to do that with a dog in your left hand.
And coffee in your other hand.
Exactly.
Gene retired on November 30th, 1979 at the rank of Master Sergeant. I don't know that much about the military, but I believe that Master Sergeant is as high as you can go without a college degree, and those guys are tough.
Yep.
During his time in the military, he had 7 children.
Wow.
His oldest son, he and Becky, his wife, had
Right.
7 children together. His oldest son is Ronald Gene Simmons Jr., so he's Gene Simmons Jr. They call him Gene Jr.
Okay.
He's born in 1961, just a year after his parents marry.
All right.
Then 2 years later, Sheila Marie is born on October 24th, 1963. Sheila will be Gene's favorite child. She is his little princess. Little princess.
Okay.
On January 25th, 1965, Gene and Becky have another son, William Henry Simmons, goes by Bill, followed 5 years later by a daughter, Loretta. 3 years after that, in 1973, a son, Eddie, is born, followed by Mary Ann in 1976, and finally the youngest is born in the year that Gene retires from the military. Rebecca is her name. She goes by Little Becky because she's named after her mom. She's born in 1979.
Okay.
Lots of kids named after other people. So we have 2 Genes and 2 Beckys just in the immediate family.
Wow.
So 7 kids by the time he retires in 1979.
Wow. Busy man.
Busy guy. And they, that's called foreshadowing. And they live in New Mexico.
Okay.
Now, Gene kept the kids and his wife Becky away from everybody. They were told what to do, when to do it. This is when they lived in Cloudcroft, New Mexico. But Gene's obsession with his little princess, Sheila, actually turns incestuous.
Ooh.
By the spring of 1981, it's pretty apparent that Sheila is pregnant with her father's child.
Good Lord.
And by the end of March of that year, 1981, she tells her friends that she is pregnant and that her father is the father
Jeez.
of the baby.
Man.
She tells them that her dad had sexually assaulted her 3 different times. I think that's way low, way low.
Yeah.
These friends of hers went home and told their parents, who in turn let the school administrators know, and they went to the sheriff in Cloudcroft, New Mexico.
Good.
Now, Sheila's only about 16 years old at this time. And when the oldest of Gene's kids, Gene Jr., finds out what's going on. He called the New Mexico Department of Human Services to report incest in his family. Now, the Alamogordo District Attorney, Steve Sanders, he puts the stories together, but it was all hearsay, and it couldn't be used in court. So he subpoenaed Sheila to appear before a grand jury. And the first time, she didn't show up.
Really?
So he told, well, she's 16 years old. She's afraid of her dad. He isolates them from everybody. He tells them where to go and what to do. And now suddenly she's going to go testify against her dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's probably going to go to jail. So the first time she doesn't show up. And he comes to her, the DA comes to her and says, I'm going to issue an arrest warrant for you for contempt of court.
Wow.
And the second time, she showed up.
I would too.
She testified for 2 hours, and she's obviously pregnant sitting there in court. She's crying her eyes out, saying that she didn't want her dad to go to prison. But of course, based on what she told the grand jury, an arrest warrant is issued, and Gene is indicted. But before the warrant for his arrest can be served, Gene packed up his family and moved them all to Arkansas.
He vamoosed out of there.
Out of there.
Yep.
Now, by this time, Gene Jr.'s 20 years old. He's out of high school. I think he's still living at home, but I don't believe he made the trip to Arkansas. Maybe he did. I don't think that he did.
All right.
And he might not have just made the cut because he called child services on his dad, right?
Yeah.
I say this because, interestingly enough, less than a year later, in July of 1982, the DA, Steve Saunders, who prosecuted Gene Sr., is giving a guest lecture at the Alamogordo branch of the New Mexico State University when a student asks a question about a case against the mayor of that town, Alamogordo. His name is Frank Carr, who had been convicted of molesting 20 people. The mayor.
Good Lord.
But after this lecture, this kid comes up to the DA, Steve, and he introduces himself and he says, hey, I'm Ronald Gene Simmons Jr. And he chastised Steve Saunders, saying that you tried to prosecute my dad and you scared him away. And then he tells the DA, if you drop the charges, I'll get my dad and my sister back to New Mexico, and I'll get everybody to go to counseling. I'll get them all to agree to go to counseling.
Okay.
And on August 10th of 1982, a year after Gene was charged, the incest charges were, quote, conditionally dropped, meaning they would be reinstated if they wanted to do that.
Okay.
But Big Gene didn't return to New Mexico. On June 17th, 1981, 16-year-old Sheila gives birth to a little girl, Sylvia Gale, in Arkansas.
Was there any problems with the baby at all?
No, not that I read. Not that I read.
All right.
But Gene has moved his family to Arkansas, where he wanted to recapture the happiness he had known as a child in the little town of Hector.
Okay.
He rented a house for his big brood of kids in Ward.
Yeah.
But his long-term plan was to move back to Hector, and so he kept an eye on real estate ads because he wanted some land.
Okay.
But all these kids and his wife are really still under their father's thumb and the husband's thumb, Gene's thumb.
Right.
The family remained just as isolated as they were in New Mexico. They weren't allowed to answer the front door unless Gene was there.
What?
Yeah. And remember, this is the 70s. We answered the phone, we answered the door, we answered everything back then.
Yeah, we lived out in the country, and every time a car drove by the country road, we'd all get up and look out the window to see who it was. I'm serious.
Who's coming?
That's how far out in the country we lived.
Yeah, I mean, and this is, they're living in a pretty rural area too. But Gene found a job as a file clerk for the Veterans Administration Medical Center in Little Rock. But soon afterward, he went to work for the recruiting office. And by this time, he's having some serious financial problems because he still owed thousands of dollars on a mortgaged property in New Mexico. And he's not earning enough money to support Becky and the 6 kids who are still living at home with him.
Yeah.
And those children included Sylvia Gale, his incestuous
granddaughter
and daughter.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That's messed up.
And I got news for you. Just because they moved from New Mexico, Gene did not stop molesting his daughter,
Really?
raping his daughter. Yeah.
Jeez.
This is a relationship that continued after the move to Arkansas.
Oh, my gosh.
And by the end of 1983, Sheila was pregnant again. And Gene was really vocal. He was an opponent. He didn't like abortion for other people. But he made an exception for his daughter, and he took her to Dermot for a secret procedure. So she did get an abortion the second time.
Okay.
Now, while they were living in Ward, Sheila enrolled in the Draughton School of Business in Little Rock, where she met fellow student Dennis McNulty. And these two took a shine to each other, and they started dating. And it wasn't long before she trusted him enough to confide in him about her troubled life with her dad and at home.
Wow.
Meanwhile, Gene continued to search the newspaper ads for property for sale in Hector and even made a trip there, but he finally had to settle for a place just outside of Dover, 12 miles away from his childhood dream town. And he called their new home Mockingbird Hill and named the lane, the drive up to where they're going to live, Little Princess Lane, in honor of Sheila.
There's so many creepy things about this story already. We haven't even got to the murder.
I know. Yeah. But let me tell you what. This property was a pit. This place was a pit. And he kept the kids and his wife, Becky. They're once again secluded. You really couldn't see the house. Well, it wasn't a house. It was two mobile homes cut apart and then put back together again. And you couldn't see them from the road.
Wow.
And even the school bus driver in Dover, Arkansas, where they lived, said that he, quote, he kept that barbed wire fence across the dirt road up to his house closed up all the time.
Man.
I would drop the kids off and watch them crawl under the barbed wire fence, or if they opened it, they would always fasten it behind them, end quote.
Sounds like heaven.
So you got to know if your bus driver is worried about you, there's a, I mean, it's a small town. I get it. The bus driver probably knew everybody, but he was worried about these kids.
Yeah.
Gene kept a tight rein on his wife, and he would sleep and eat and spend his time alone in his own room, which was cluttered and dirty and smelly. It was like a hoarder's house in that room, just in that one room. That's where he would hide out.
Right.
On the property, he kept chickens. They had 14 acres, and he had a pond on this very secluded plot of land.
Had a pool and had a pond. Pond be good for you.
We have a pond in the back. We have a pool and a pond. A pond would be good for you.
Sorry.
But he's not just ordering everybody around. He's putting everybody to work, even these little kids.
Yeah.
They would do all the chores around the farm, like carrying big rocks up the drive or lane when it was really wet and muddy from the rain. They'd carry these huge rocks up this long lane to shove it in the ruts so they could drive up the lane.
What a childhood.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Gene put up a handmade, extremely tall fence that was 9 feet tall in some areas. And like I said, their home was 2 trailers, Jimmy rigged together, Jerry, Jimmy.
Tom, Dick, Harry, it don't matter.
Whichever one.
Billy rigged.
It's all rigged together to make one home. And in my mind, I was picturing it put together with duct tape or something.
Yeah.
Because get this, they had no running water or indoor plumbing.
What?
And they had a mailbox, but I read that they sent no mail and they got no mail.
This guy definitely wanted to be off the grid.
Yeah, I guess.
Wow.
But they're all afraid of him, wife and kids. And the friends of the children who were allowed to enter the house said that he was really strict. And even the little kids would help him cut wood and would bring him his motorcycle boots and jacket before he left for work. They're like his little minions.
Yeah.
But his beloved daughter, Sheila, was changing. She was growing up. She wasn't as compliant as she had been. And now she's in love. And the object of her affection wasn't dear old Dad.
Yeah.
And when she announced her plans to marry Dennis, Gene was pissed.
Oh, man.
He felt betrayed. How could she? After all he'd done for her, didn't she realize that he adored her? He's furious.
Wow.
But for once, his will is not going to be done.
Right.
Because Sheila became Mrs. Dennis McNulty in September of 1984 and moved in with her new husband to his hometown of Camden. Now, Gene's love turned to hate very quickly, and he told Sheila, I'll see you in hell.
Wow.
He doesn't mean it.
Yeah.
So Sheila's gone and married. Gene Jr., the oldest boy, is gone, and he is now married. Big Gene's kingdom is like shrinking down to nothing.
Right.
And soon his son Billy is out of the house. He gets married too. He marries a girl named Renetta Lynn May. So who's left in this house? Loretta, who's now in high school. And what do you think Gene does?
I'm thinking you can't change a leopard's spots.
Well, he tries to substitute Loretta for Sheila, but his second oldest daughter was smarter. She's a lot more independent. And Loretta, who had made friends at school, was openly sarcastic about her dad. He didn't like it one little bit. Like, she would talk back to him.
Right.
And she never let him do to her what he had done to Sheila.
Well, she learned how devastating it was for her sister and what she went through.
And then, of course, they moved, too.
Yeah.
And the people in this town who knew Gene said that he was strange and brooding with a pot belly and a bald, pointed head. Strange and brooding.
So he wasn't on the cover of GQ, is
He
what you're
was
saying.
not. And one article said that his bitterness, quote, festered like an old war wound, end quote.
Wow.
Now, I said, he told Sheila, I'll see you in hell.
Right.
But he would make her these cassette tapes that he would send to her.
What?
And then there would be like music playing in the background. It would be like You Were Always on My Mind, like Willie Nelson playing. And in the background, so it's like he's got the music playing, but he's recording himself crying with the music in the background. He's sobbing, and he's sending these to Sheila.
Dude.
That's why I said, I'll see you in hell. Yeah, no.
Wow.
But as far as Gene's work life, well, he's failing there too. Everywhere he went, he was known as a sexist asshole who would try to flirt with his female coworkers and basically sexually harass them.
Wow.
He started out as a records clerk for the VA, then a waivers clerk for the Army Recruiting Center in Little Rock. Then he was a janitor for a pickle company in Atkins, Arkansas.
Can you see that on your resume?
Pickle company.
What was your last employment? I was a janitor in a pickle factory.
I love pickles.
Rob loves a good pickle.
Actually, only if they're sweet and hot.
He brought them home from the grocery the other day. Look, I got myself some pickles.
Yeah, I mean, there is
like,
no food that
"Okay, honey."
there's no food that I won't eat except pickles, unless they're sweet and hot.
Yeah, but of course he pulled them out of the bag. Look, got myself some pickles.
I treated myself.
All right, honey.
A lot of people get ice cream or
You
donuts.
got that too.
Well, it's true. I cannot lie.
But he's a janitor at a pickle company. He's not making enough money to support his wife and the 5 children who still live at home, as well as his property in Arkansas and the mortgage in New Mexico, right?
It doesn't sound like a well thought out, reasonable guy.
No, and they don't have, running water, and they don't have a toilet, and they're duct taped together, right?
Yeah. There wasn't even Gorilla Tape then.
Yeah. Rob's favorite.
It is. It's the best.
But by 1985-86, Gene is working 2 jobs, one at Sinclair Mini Mart in Russellville, and also he was a clerk at a freight outfit, Woodline Motor Freight. And a couple of things happened at this job, well, happened at both jobs, but at the motor freight place, first off, Gene's working for a female supervisor.
Okay.
You can imagine that went over like
poop in a punch bowl.
Yeah. It was something he'd never had before. He's not the kind of guy who likes to take orders from women. He and I would get along so well, wouldn't we, honey?
Yes, dear.
Lord have mercy.
Oh, man.
But he's not used to taking orders from women. Her name is Joyce Butts. That's his boss. And while he's working for Joyce, he was the clerk with the least seniority. And when Gene would screw up, Joyce would tell him so. And she had the absolute gall to correct him and criticize him for not doing something correctly, and even went as far as to enter a notice of reprimand in his personal file. That's going on your permanent record. Do you remember that when you were a kid? We're putting this on your permanent record.
Oh, yeah. Try to get in college with that.
I think the only permanent record you have is criminal and with the IRS.
Yeah.
But this is also at this Woodline Motor Freight place. This is where he meets Kathy Kendrick. And I think he liked Kathy because she looked like his daughter, Sheila.
Oh, no.
He made passes at her, and she told him to leave her alone. Back off, dude. I'm married. She has a baby boy. But not only that, who do you think she told is creeping around her and giving her a hard time?
His supervisor.
She told Joyce,
Yeah.
who reprimanded Gene again.
Wow.
And when she got him on a third time, Gene quit. I'm out.
Yeah.
Kathy also leaves the company, and she goes to work at a law firm called Peel, Eddy, and Gibbons.
Okay.
But remember I said he's working 2 jobs. He's still got his job at the Minute Mart, which was owned by Taylor Oil Company. And here he works for a guy named Russell. He goes by Rusty Taylor. And the Minute Mart manager, who is his direct supervisor, is David Salyer.
Okay.
Now, meanwhile, in 1985, Sheila, who's married and has the one daughter, who's biologically her dad's, has a second child by her husband, Dennis. They named this little boy Michael. And Sheila's not the only one giving birth and giving grandchildren to Beth and Gene.
Okay.
Bill has a son. They name him Trey. He's a third with his wife, Renetta Lynn, in April of 1986.
All right.
And Gene Jr. and his wife also have a child. They have a little girl named Barbara. Now, as the kids are getting older, Gene's wife Becky's getting braver. And at home, he's staying in his room alone. He's brooding over the loss of Sheila and the respect he no longer gets from his family or his coworkers. And he let his appearance go, which has to be a pretty short
Yeah.
drop off because they're already saying he's like
Yeah.
paunchy and balding and yeah.
Okay.
But he had a beard and he let this beard grow really long. Yeah, he's paunchy and unkempt.
Every quality a woman is looking for.
Every girl's dream, right? But in the beginning, he had kind of just been a moderate drinker. But he just kept drinking more and more. And Loretta, the oldest girl at home, she told a classmate that her dad was a, quote, a drunken bum, end quote.
Wow.
And despite all the, quote, improvements that he made to this property and their taped together mobile home, and he'd forced his kids to make this 13-acre spread, Mockingbird Hill, he's trying to make it look like something. It looked like a dump.
Yeah.
And in short, Ronald Gene Simmons is a failure on all fronts.
Mm-hmm.
His dream property is a dump filled with like burnout old cars, tons of empty cans of Schlitz, and a family who hated him.
Wow.
But Becky is gaining more and more self-confidence. She's becoming more and more resourceful. She'd actually devised a way to communicate with her grown children and her sister, whose name is V, behind Gene's back in front of his face. Like she had figured out a code to be able to talk to her older kids
Gotcha.
and her family, so he didn't know what she was saying about him.
Sure.
She liked to call her husband Fatso, among other unflattering names.
Man.
Yeah.
Wow.
And she had stayed with Gene, ironically, for the sake of the children. She didn't think it was possible for her to raise them and support them without him. But in 1987, her grown children and her sister V finally convinced her that she'd be able to draw some of Gene's military benefits and child support. Plus, she already had threatened to turn him into the police.
Mm-hmm.
So she had sort of made this internal resolve, I'm going to leave him. And Loretta actually told her friends at school, my mom is leaving my dad.
Wow.
Finally. Like she's excited about it.
Right.
But because they thought there was safety in numbers, Gene Jr., Billy, and Sheila, along with their spouses, agreed they would meet for Christmas at Mockingbird Hill. Christmas had always been like a really fun time for the family, and even the old Grinch himself got into a festive mood.
You have termites in your smile.
He was easier to tolerate around the holidays, I read.
Yeah.
But only this Christmas, Becky's gift to herself was her freedom. She was gonna leave. But what she didn't know was that Gene had been making plans himself.
Mm-mm.
So she's going to wait until all her kids come in for Christmas, and she's going to leave with them.
Wow.
Safety in numbers, right?
Right.
But Gene's been making plans. 2 months before, in October of 1987, he made these little kids living at home dig a hole, telling them it was for the new outhouse. Remember, no running water, no plumbing.
Yeah.
December rolls around and Becky's making her plans and talking in code to her family. She's going to leave him. And on December 18th, 1987, Gene calls his boss, David Salyer. This is his boss at the Minute Mart, and he calls him and he says, I quit. And his boss was actually nice about it and asked, is everything okay? Did you want to talk about anything? And Gene just tells him, nah, I'm good. I'm just burnt out. I quit.
He's burnt out from working at the Minute Mart.
Drinking his Schlitz.
Oh, boy. Okay.
Now, according to neighbors at this point, the Simmons home looked like a, quote, an encampment under siege, end quote. They had canned goods and bottled water and hundreds of plastic jugs all around the property. The phone had been cut off. There were these no trespassing signs everywhere. Cinder blocks were holding up the house. Basically, it's a Halloween movie when you get lost out in the country. And that's the only place you can go for help.
Sounds like it.
4 days after Gene quits his last job at the Minute Mart, it's the morning of December 22nd, 1987. There's a Christmas tree in the trailer with presents under it. The kids are all excited because it's the last day of school before Christmas break. And Gene's oldest son, Gene Jr., and his little daughter, Barbara, were already at the house for the holidays. Loretta, Eddie, Mary Ann, and little Becky left for school. Now, Big Gene goes into Gene Jr.'s room. He's asleep. He hit his son on the head and shoulders with a crowbar.
Yeah.
But Gene Jr. jumps up. He's 29 years old. He tries to fight back. This is evidenced by some bloody handprints on that bedroom wall. But his father shot him once in the chest and 4 times in the head and face.
Grief. Yeah, there's some rage.
Becky heard the shots from her bedroom across the hall. She knew what was coming. Becky's still in her pajamas. Gene hits her with the same crowbar before shooting and killing her. But don't forget, Gene Jr. had this daughter with him, Barbara.
Yeah.
He and his wife were actually separated, but they were trying to reconcile, and Gene Jr. had with him their little girl. So after killing his wife and his oldest son, Gene strangled 3-year-old Barbara.
Good grief.
Then he tossed his son, his wife, and his granddaughter's bodies into the pit he had his kids dig just a couple of weeks before, and he poured kerosene on top of them.
Wow.
He had himself a few beers, and he waited for his kids to get home from school. School lets out. It's Christmas holiday. Everybody's excited. They get off the bus. The bus driver, who's like worried for him, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Yeah.
They get home from school, and Gene tells the kids that he had Christmas presents for each of them, but he wanted to give them to them one at a time. So first he takes 17-year-old Loretta outside. He strangles her and drowns her in the rain barrel, holding her head underwater. The other 3 children suffer the same fate.
Wow.
He does it to Eddie, to Mary Ann, and to Becky.
Man.
He has now killed 5 of his 7 children.
Good grief.
1 grandchild and his wife.
Oh, man.
He throws them all out into the pit and covers them again in kerosene. And he says that he does this to keep the animals away and to keep them from smelling. I mean, it's the 22nd of December. It's got to be a little chilly out.
Yeah.
His other 2 children, Billy and his beloved Sheila, weren't due to come to the house to celebrate Christmas until the 26th, the day after Christmas. So Gene just waits it out for 4 days with his family dead outside his house in this pit. And he's got the Christmas tree in there with presents.
Wow.
Around midday on December 26, 1987, Gene's son Billy and his wife Renetta are both shot as soon as they walk into the trailer. And they have with them their 20-month-old son, Trey.
Oh, no.
And Gene strangles him, drowns him, wraps him in plastic, and put him in the trunk of an abandoned car that's just sitting on the property.
Why'd he do that?
Why did he do any of
Yeah,
this?
it's true. It's true. But man, there's no rhyme or reason for any of this, but to wrap him.
Yeah.
Okay.
He lays Billy and his wife out in the trailer. Finally, later that day, Sheila, his princess, who he'd raped and had a granddaughter/daughter with, Sylvia Gale, she's now 6 years old, and Sheila's husband, Dennis McNulty, and the child they had together, 20-month-old Michael, they show up at the trailer. And when they walk into the house, Gene shoots Dennis and Sheila, and then he strangles the two children, 6-year-old Sylvia. She tried to get away from her biological father/grandfather. She ran to a bedroom where he strangled her because her body is found in that bedroom face down.
Wow.
Then he strangles the other child, Michael, the baby. He lays this entire family out side by side in the trailer on the floor. He covers them up with their coats. He did this with everybody except Sheila. He put her on the dining room table and covered her with his dead wife's best tablecloth.
Good night.
She
Wow.
was up like on a shrine.
Oh, man.
Again, the baby was wrapped in plastic and put in the trunk of an abandoned car. Now, after the murders, Gene drove to a Sears store in Russellville where he retrieved Christmas presents that he had previously ordered for his family that didn't come in until after the holidays. And then that night, he went for a drink at a local bar before coming home, where he spent the rest of the evening and the following day drinking beer and watching television while his family's dead bodies are all around him.
Wow, this is one twisted puppy.
It's the weekend, and he spends it surrounded by their corpses. And he waits for Monday, December 28th. And on the morning of December 28th, Gene drove to a Walmart in Russellville where he purchased another gun to use in the attack he was getting ready to carry out. He's actually driving his son's truck with a car seat sitting next to him, and he's killed that child, his grandchild. After buying the second gun, he went after his next victim, Kathy Kendrick, the young woman who had spurned him when they worked together at Woodline Motor Freight. He shot her at the Peel Law Firm, where she'd found a new job after she left Woodline. She died a few hours later. Wow. Then he drove to Taylor Oil Company, where he meant to settle a score with Rusty Taylor. That's his former employer.
Right.
From the Minute Mart. So Rusty actually owns the gas station Minute Mart.
Okay.
So that's why he goes to Taylor Oil Company.
What beef did he have with him?
Don't know, but he shot Taylor and turned and almost by reflex shot J.D. Chafin, an off-duty fireman who was entering the building.
Ugh.
Rusty survived, but the fireman, J.D. Chafin, died instantly.
Man.
Then he drove to the actual mini mart, and Gene shot at the manager, David Salyer, but missed. And when Roberta Woolery, the cashier, reached for the phone, Gene shot her in the face and the shoulder.
Oh, man.
Salyer grabbed a chair and threw it at Gene, but Gene got a shot off that struck him in the head. Another man in the store started throwing cans of food and soft drinks at Gene, but Gene just walks out the door. And with blood streaming from her wounds, the cashier calls the cops and identifies the shooter as Gene Simmons, who had one more stop to make before giving himself up.
And she was shot in the face.
She was shot in the face.
Wow.
He drove to Woodline Motor Freight, where he shot his former supervisor, Joyce Butts, in the head and chest. Gene thought she was dead, but Joyce actually survived. She would never recover. But with his fury finally spent, Gene takes company employee Vicki Jackson by gunpoint and says, "Come with me." They go to the computer room. He sat her down and says, "Call the police."
Really?
Call the police.
Wow.
Yeah. And he waited in that office with her while the police were on the way. And Gene allegedly told Vicki Jackson, quote, "I've come to do what I wanted to do. It's all over now. I've gotten everybody who wanted to hurt me," end quote. And when the police show up, he surrenders without a fight.
Man.
After his capture, Gene refused to talk, but his lip quivered and his eyes were welling up when he was asked about his family. Sheriff James Bolin grabbed his coat and said, quote, "That crazy son of a bitch may have killed his whole family up there," end quote. And I'm guessing he said some bitch.
That son of a bitch.
Yeah. Yep.
So Sheriff Bolin's premonition is right, because they get to Mockingbird Hill and they find inside the trailer Gene's son Billy and his wife Renetta, alongside those of his daughter Sheila and her husband Dennis, 6-year-old Sylvia, who's in the bedroom face down. And they can tell that more has happened in this place than what they're seeing.
Yep.
And authorities learned from the in-laws that as many as 9 members of the Simmons family were unaccounted for. So the next morning, men were back on Mockingbird Hill going over this 14-acre property, and they zeroed in on a plot of land that was covered with corrugated tin and barbed wire, and underneath was freshly turned earth by the children, and they started digging. The hole that Loretta, Eddie, Marianne, and Rebecca had prepared for the new outhouse was now their grave.
Right.
And in the pit were the bodies of Gene's wife, Becky, their oldest son, Gene Jr., and his 3-year-old daughter, Barbara. Still missing were Billy's baby son, Trey, and 20-month-old Michael McNulty. And police lieutenants Ray Caldwell and Jay Winters, they're just all over this property going, where are these 2 babies? Where are they?
Right.
And they find them in these old cars that had been abandoned forever. They had to use crowbars to pop the trunks on every single car, and they found the bodies that contained both little boys.
Wow.
Yeah. And they were wet. They were soaking wet and in garbage bags. Yeah.
Wow.
All the adult victims had been shot multiple times. All the children died by strangulation.
Right.
Now, Gene was sent to the Arkansas State Hospital in Little Rock for a competency evaluation, right? Makes sense.
Yep.
But they find that Gene is sane and capable of standing trial. And public defenders Robert G. Doc Irwin and John Harris were appointed to represent Gene. And the prosecuting attorney was a guy named John Bynum. And jury selection for the first trial took less than 6 hours. Now, he tells his state-appointed attorneys he didn't want to plead insanity. Instead, at his first trial for the murders of Kathy Kendrick and J.D. Chafin, that's the fireman,
Right.
he read a statement requesting the death penalty. And he got it.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
He received another death penalty sentence for the annihilation of his family, but he didn't want to talk to anybody. He didn't want to give a reason why, but he reached out to one reporter. Her name was Ann Jansen. She was a news reporter for KTHV-TV in Little Rock. And when Gene saw her from his jail cell...
Let me guess. Did she look like his daughter?
She looked like Sheila.
Yeah.
So he wrote to her on October 24th, which was Sheila's birthday, and Jansen sets up a series of in-person interviews with Gene. She described him as, quote, intense and, quote, compelling. By this time, he'd had a long beard. He has this long beard. And she's asking him, do you miss your family? And he says, yes. Do you feel remorse? Yes, of course. Have you considered suicide? He said that he had, but he was afraid if he shot himself, something might go wrong and he would be left alive but incapacitated. He knew he had made a mistake using the .22 caliber gun. That was his mistake.
Okay.
Because it was too small to do the job, which is why he shot some of the victims so many times. That's why everybody had so many gunshots. Yeah.
Wow.
He was bizarre. He was, quote, extremely paranoid, end quote. He thought his cell was bugged. And this news reporter, Jansen, came out of the meetings feeling drained. Quote, it was like your brain ached, end quote.
Yeah.
But she looked at him and said, quote, will you ever tell us why? And he says, quote, I'm not going to comment on that, end quote.
So he never admitted.
Never said why.
Wow.
He admits to it.
No, but I meant he never admitted to why
He never gives his motive. So Ronald Gene Simmons was convicted on May 12, 1988 in the Franklin County Circuit Court for the deaths of Kathy Kendrick and J.D. Chafin. He was found guilty of 14 counts of capital murder and the deaths of his family members on February 10, 1989 in the Johnson County Circuit Court with Judge Patterson presiding. And D.A. John Bynum offers up this possible motive when he presented an undated note that was discovered in a safety deposit box at a Russellville bank after his arrest, after they arrest Gene.
Okay.
And the letter seemed to indicate this strong love-hate relationship between him and Sheila.
Right.
And after the judge ruled that the letter was inadmissible, Gene lashed out at the DA and punched him in the face.
Oh, man.
And then unsuccessfully struggled for a deputy's handgun. This is all happening in court.
Jeez.
And officers rushed him out of the courtroom in chains. Gene was sentenced to death by lethal injection on March 16, 1989. He again waived his rights to an appeal. But the guys who were on death row were not happy about this because it was setting a precedent.
Right.
They wanted him to appeal, and he didn't want to appeal.
Right.
So they're trying to say he's not competent enough to say that he needs to appeal.
Right.
And on March 1st, 1989, Gene was found competent to waive his rights to appeal his conviction. However, the filing of Whitmore versus Arkansas challenged this right, and Reverend Louis Franz and Jonas Whitmore contended that Gene, using his right to refuse appeal, in fact jeopardized the appellate rights of other death row inmates.
Are you kidding me?
No.
Wow.
By a 7-2 vote, this goes all the way to the Arkansas Supreme Court. By a 7-2 vote, the Supreme Court justices threw out his appeal. However, the ongoing legal proceedings had prevented the execution of Gene from being carried out. So he had an execution date. But because of all this paperwork, they're like, no, let's hold off. And Gene was actually watching television and eating what he thought would be his last meal when the news of his stay of execution was announced by Governor Bill Clinton.
Oh, really?
Yeah. On May 31st, 1990, Governor Bill Clinton did in fact sign Gene's second execution warrant for June 25th, 1990. This was the quickest sentence to execution to death time in the United States history since the death penalty was reinstated in 1976.
And well-deserved.
Yeah. Gene refused all visitors, including legal counsel and clergy. As he awaited his execution, guards logged his every move, including the trivial fact that he killed cockroaches in his cell. I'd kill the cockroaches in my cell, too.
Exactly, whether you murdered anyone or not.
For his last meal, he requested filet mignon, 2 raw onions, tomato slices, 1 banana, 6 rolls, and a 7-Up.
Okay, that's the weirdest meal I've ever heard.
His last words were, quote, "Justice delayed, finally be done, is justifiable homicide," end quote. Don't even know what that means.
Yeah, okay.
No family members claimed his body, so Gene was buried in a pauper's plot at Lincoln Memorial Lawn in Varner, Arkansas. Now, after Gene murdered his family, people back in New Mexico, including the DA who went after Gene for incest with Sheila when she was 16, they all kind of felt horrible about this mass murder of this family because everybody knew he wasn't right. Everybody in that town was like, he ain't right.
Right.
He ain't right. And he kept these kids and his wife isolated from everybody. He kept them like prisoners. But even the school officials in New Mexico and Arkansas stepped forward and said that the children weren't great students, but they were always at school. They were always on time, and they were always clean.
Right.
But they didn't have many friends. But they didn't cause any trouble. So they didn't see any red flags, even though everybody knew in this small town of less than 2,000 people that Gene was this controlling asshole. I mean, you know, if the bus driver is worried about him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
But that is the story of Gene Simmons and how he ridded himself of his family over Christmas. And that's all I have to say about that.
It's just amazing to me the depravity and the evilness of a single person. I mean, there was no
selfishness.
and there's no rhyme or reason to it either.
He was taking out everybody who had done him wrong. He felt like they would all ganged up on him. They'd all done him wrong. They'd either, fired him or whatever. But the Minute Mark people, that part I don't get. I mean, his boss was even like, "You want to talk about it?"
Yeah.
No, I'm going to come in a few days and shoot up the whole place.
Yeah.
That's my plan.
Yeah. No, I'm good. Oh,
yeah.
Wow. Well, it's a sad situation. It's a sad story, but he got what he deserved in the end.
Yeah, when he's told his daughter he'd see her in hell, he'd see Sheila in hell. I'm pretty sure he's there, but I don't think she is.
Yeah,
he was disappointed when he got there.
Yeah, Sheila's got a pair of wings. She can look down on him.
Absolutely does. She absolutely does.
All right. Well, let's change course here and do a little bless your heart. All right, number one, I'm calling That Ain't No EV.
Electrical vehicle, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Florida Keys authorities say a drunken man from Rhode Island stole a forklift and crashed it into a gate in Marathon, telling deputies, "Well, I lost my car keys and I needed something to drive," reports the AP.
Is this in Florida?
The Monroe County Sheriff's Office says in a news release that 44-year-old Edward Quinton of Greenwich, Rhode Island, told deputies he was in the Keys helping friends move.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Quinton was quoted as saying that after he lost his keys Thursday night, he needed a vehicle and took the forklift from a Marathon marina because he knows how to drive one.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
You think there was alcohol involved?
No, not at all.
Lost his keys? I'm just saying. Okay.
Quinton also told deputies he thought he could fix the damaged gate on account of him being a genius. Breath tests showed Quinton's blood alcohol level was twice Florida's legal limit.
Go figure.
Yeah, he faces drunk driving, criminal mischief, burglary, and grand theft charges. Jail records listed no attorney for Quinton. So there you go.
He wasn't going too fast. At least we know that part.
Yeah. All right, number two, I'll see you in the morning.
Okay.
Quote, if he can survive the remaining 340-some days of the year, he will definitely win the dumbest criminal of the year, unquote, says Police Chief David Splain.
Okay.
All right.
That's going to be a tough task.
Yeah.
Dumbest criminal. There are a lot of them.
Oh, this is a good one. The dumb criminal in question is Pennsylvania 17-year-old Jason Hayes, who is charged with kidnapping and robbing an old woman at gunpoint.
Oh, that doesn't sound good.
Well, it gets better. Police say Hayes entered the victim's home through a window and woke her up by poking her with a gun. When she didn't have any cash to give him, he allegedly made her drive to an ATM. Police say he wanted $2,000, but the ATM would only let the victim withdraw $460.
Oh.
Yeah. Hayes allegedly held the victim and her husband at gunpoint in their kitchen for another hour or so before telling the victim to meet him in a parking lot the following morning with $1,500. Quote, not that we would believe that a robber would have ever shown up for a scheduled appointment, but it was something we had to cover, quotes Officer Splain.
This older couple are like, okay, so you might have gotten into our house. Yeah. You might have held us at gunpoint.
Yeah.
But we're not stupid, and you are.
Yeah. Well, not only did Hayes show up, but he was wearing the exact same clothes the victims described from the previous morning. Yeah. Unfortunately for him, it was the police and not the victims who were waiting for him. According to Fox, Hayes allegedly had $363 and what appeared to be the victim's watch on him when he was arrested. Police say Hayes threatened to kill the couple multiple times, including if they went to the cops. They are, quote, scared to death of him.
Yeah, they really are. What did he spend the money on? I
don't know. Well, Hayes is facing 11 charges, including robbery, kidnapping, in connection with that incident. So, yeah, he's pretty much screwed.
17, though.
Yeah, well, yeah,
they're going to try him as an adult? We'll find out.
Yeah. All right, number 3, and finally.
Yes.
Well, I didn't see that one coming.
You like that title.
I do. I do. Authorities say they visited a North Carolina home this week after receiving a tip about a crime, but the crime they found wasn't the one that Kobe Xiong, that's how you pronounce it, it's a Chinese name, Cody Xiong. After a tip came into police last week, possibly related to cockfighting operation.
Oh, no.
Yeah, per the Charlotte Observer, which I know that well because I used to live down there. An officer knocked on the door of Xiong's home near Claremont on Tuesday, Catawba County Sheriff's Coy Reed tells CBS News.
Okay.
Whatever the officer was looking for, Reed says it wasn't what he soon found, according to police, when Xiong opened up the door.
Okay.
He saw the officer and simply said, quote, "I guess you're here about the opium."
Oh.
It was only then police say they discovered poppy plants spread across an acre land behind Xiong's home. The 2,000 plants, which can be used to make heroin and opium, are believed to be worth a whopping $500 million.
Oh, my gosh.
It's unbelievable, Reed tells WBT-TV, noting only one other poppy field has been found in the U.S. this year. He adds, after an hour of pulling plants, officers had, quote, not made a dent in the crop. Quote, "It's very intimidating," an officer told WCNC on Tuesday. "I was just overwhelmed, just like the rest of the investigators when we came out here today. We weren't expecting anything this size." Officials believe the plants, once harvested, were moved to another location to be made into opium.
Yeah.
Xiong has been charged with manufacturing and trafficking by possession.
Wow.
Oh, and one more note. Yeah, some 80 chickens were also confiscated in the raid.
So all I could think of was I recently saw Wicked, but it made me think of the original Wizard of Oz and the Wicked Witch going, "Puppies, puppies." She's like looking into the monkeys are taking off. Puppies. Puppies.
I just think it's hilarious when they open the door. He goes, "Oh, I guess you're here about the opium." Oh,
Yeah.
You're not? I'm sorry. The chickens, I meant to say. Jeez, what a moron. Bless their hearts.
He really cocked that one up.
Ah,
I'm on fire today.
You are on
I'm
fire.
on fire. Well, if you have a bless your heart or you know somebody's heart who needs blessing, all you got to do is go to hitchedtohomicide.com. When you get there, there's a pull-down menu, and while you're there, you can also suggest a case and tell us about your brush with true crime. Hopefully it's not in a cockfighting incident or a poppy field.
Good Lord.
That's my amazing husband out there.
And that's my beautiful bride in the booth.
Join us next time on Hitched to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.